In this video today we're going to make a beef biryani, and it's quite an involved recipe. It involves quite a lot of spices and one or two bits of equipment, so we're going to take a look at what we need before we make a start. I did do a time lapse of this video, I think it was a couple of years ago, and I realised it doesn't actually show you anything. It looks nice, but it's not very instructional. So we're going to take a look at our ingredients and we'll take a look at the equipment we need. So the beef biryani is a traditional curry that you would serve at a banquet or a wedding. It's not an everyday curry, and this is indeed an extra special beef biryani. And as such, the list of ingredients can seem a little bit daunting, but it's really not that much when you look at it. So the recipe calls for some coriander seeds and cumin seeds. If you've not got the cumin seeds and coriander seeds, you can use pre-ground coriander and cumin. That's fine. As is the cinnamon. It calls for a cinnamon stick, but you can use pre-ground cinnamon. We're also going to need some cardamom pods, some bay leaves, some nutmeg, some cloves and some salt and pepper. And also, to give it some spice, we're going to add some chilies. Recipe calls for red chilies. I can't get them, so I'm using green. In addition, you need 4 onions, some cloves of garlic and some fresh ginger. Also, what makes this extra special is that we're going to add some saffron milk. So this is milk that's had saffron soaking in it overnight, and that gives it a nice curry. It also adds to the flavour. So the beef we're using is this is chuck beef, chuck steak, but I found in the UK shin beef works really well. You're going to need some basmati rice and some whole milk plain yogurt. So the garnish, so once this has been in the oven, the garnish for this is boiled eggs on top. So you need 3 large eggs, which you're going to boil until they're hard. Some sultanas, which are golden raisins in the US, and it calls for flaked almonds, but I don't have any today, so I'm using walnuts. And the final garnish is some coriander or cilantro leaves. And again, the recipe calls for fresh coriander leaves, but we don't have any, so I'm going to be using dried, so they'll be just fine. So in addition to all the spices that you need and your beef, and you're also going to need some cooking utensils. So you're going to need a large frying pan, so that's going to fry up the beef and the onions. You're then going to need a large pot to go on the top of your stove onto your cooker, and that's going to be used to simmer the onions and the beef together so they go tender. And then we bake the whole thing. Once we've got the rice in with the beef as well, we're going to bake that in an oven. So you need an oven-proof casserole dish, and also to go along with that you need some aluminium foil, because we're going to need to seal the top of this casserole dish so that all the moisture stays inside. You're also going to need a food processor or a blender. If you don't have a food processor, that'll be fine. And if you're going to be doing whole spices, you're going to need a spice grinder as well, or a pestle and mortar. But as I say, if you're not going to use whole spices and you use pre-ground spices, that's fine. You don't need a grinder then. You need 1 kilogram or 2.2 pounds of beef, and that wants to be cut into cubes round about 1 inch square like this, and then you fry that in the pan in batches. You can't fit it all in the pan all together because you can't turn it. You need to turn it and get it browned on all sides. So you're not trying to cook this meat through, we just want to seal the edges and give it a little bit of colour. So you fry it in batches and then transfer it to a large pot. So while your beef's frying, you can use that time to take the skin off your onions and chop all 4 of the onions into half. You're going to use 2 of the onions in the sauce, and you're going to save 2 of the onions and slice them and then fry those, and they get layered in between the rice and the meat inside the casserole dish. So 2 onions go in your sauce, 2 onions we set to one side and fry them later. So the 2 onions that we're going to put in the blender, they can just be chopped fairly coarsely. They don't have to be chopped fine, because they're going to get blitz. As I say, you can use a blender or a food processor. Either will do the job. Really, the only purpose is to break the onions down, the garlic, the chilies, to make them into a smooth sauce. So you need a 25-gram piece of ginger. So this weighs a little bit more than that, but by the time we've cut all the skin off, it'll be around about 25 grams or an ounce, whichever way you measure it. And just like the onions, this gets chopped and put into the food processor. So next we come on to chilies. As I said, the recipe calls for red chilies. Eventually these would turn red, but they are green, and that's fine. It's not going to make any difference. It does call for 2, but I am going to add 3 to this one, because these are not a very hot chili. But this is not a hot curry. So if you don't like heat, deseed it. If you like the heat, like myself, we'll leave the seeds in there. And again, we can chop them fairly roughly and into the food processor. And remember, as always, when you've cut chilies, wash your hands. Garlic is a key ingredient in this recipe, and it calls for 4 cloves of garlic. So once you've opened your bulb of garlic up, you want to pick out the biggest cloves of garlic that you've got. If, as sometimes happens, you end up with lots of small ones, you are going to need more. So you have to sort of use your judgment. You know, I would call that 1 clove of garlic. And I'm probably struggling, so I'm probably going to put, I've probably got 2 large ones, and then I'm probably going to put 4 smaller ones in there. You just flatten them a little bit, it makes getting the skins off a little bit easier. So into the onions and garlic and ginger and chilies, I've added 50 millilitres of water, which is about 2 fluid ounces, and we then put the lid on the blender and blend it until it's a smooth paste. Give them another go. So while we've been preparing all the onions and the garlic and the ginger, I've been frying up the beef as well, and this is what we want. We want some colour on there. So we're going to get a lot of flavour from that colouring that we've put. So this is the final batch. Did it in 3 batches. So this is what we're left with. So we've got all our beef in a pan. We want to season that well with some freshly ground black pepper, and some sea salt. in the spice grinder now I have 5 cloves. Now what the recipe doesn't tell you to do, which I have done, is to leave the stalks or the stems behind. So I've just taken the heads off of them, and because I've done that, I've actually put 7 cloves in there, or 7 heads of the clove. If you're putting the whole lot in, or if you're using ground cloves, I don't know, ground cloves, I would say just a pinch. 2 teaspoons of cumin seeds, 2 teaspoons of coriander seeds, 1/4 of a cinnamon stick, 2 teaspoons of flaked sea salt, and the seeds from 12 cardamom pods. And I'm going to now blend those together, or grind those down. So this is the blended spices, so that goes on one side. So you want to add another tablespoon of oil if needed. I'm not going to put any more in there, I think that's fine. And then we're going to fry the onion and chilli mixture that we put into our blender. So into this goes our spice mixture. And also half a nutmeg. Again, if you're using ground nutmeg, I would estimate 1/4 of a teaspoon perhaps. It's important not to overdo the nutmeg, it's a very strong spice. And you want to cook this for around about 10 minutes. So obviously we're going to add a little bit more colour to this by cooking it down. We're also going to thicken it up a little bit. And then after the 10 minutes is up, we're going to add that to the beef that we fried earlier. And then we're going to add some water, and we're going to simmer that along with the yogurt for around about 1.5 to 2 hours until the beef is very tender. So now we've got our meat and our onions combined. Next thing we want to do is add 200 millilitres of natural yogurt. So I think a tablespoon is around about 50 millilitres, so I'm going to put 4 tablespoons in there. And we then want to add the rest of our water. So we started out with 500 millilitres of water, or around about just over a pint, and we put some into our onions when we blended those, so the rest goes into this dish now. And the only other thing we need to add is a good grinding of black pepper, and then we can simmer this meat and onion mixture for over a very low heat. Bring it to the boil, then simmer it for about 1.5 to 2 hours until that beef is very, very tender. Fork tender. We don't want to have to chew this. As I say, this is a extra special banquet dish, so we need to make sure that when we're eating this, everything is just perfect. So when 2 hours have passed, you should be looking something like this. What we do now is we increase the heat, and we add 2 teaspoons of sugar. And then we want to reduce that liquid down until the sauce is thick. We need to fry the onions that we reserved. So this is 2 onions that have been sliced thinly, and we need to fry them in a little bit of oil around about 5 or 6 minutes until they're soft and starting to get some colour. In a small non-stick frying pan I am toasting my nuts. There should be flaked almonds, but I didn't have any. I should have checked before I started cooking, but I didn't. I thought I had some. So I'm using walnuts. I think they'll be fine. I've had this curry a couple of times, so I know what the flavour and texture of the curry is like, and I think these will work really well. So I'm just going to heat these in a pan for 5 or 6 minutes until they start to get some colour, and then right at the end we're going to add our sultanas, and then this is used to garnish the curry. So in this bowl I've got 325 grams of basmati rice, and I've soaked it for about 30 minutes. I've changed the water a couple of times, and it's important to do this to get rid of the starch. I've also got a pan of boiling water, and what we're going to do, we're going to boil the rice for 5 minutes, then we're going to drain it well, add a couple of teaspoons of the coriander leaves, and then we're going to start to assemble the curry. So once the rice has been boiled for 5 minutes, we drain it and add a little bit of the coriander. Then we can assemble the curry into the dish. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to put approximately half of the meat into the dish. And then we add half of the rice. And then half of the onions. Spread those out. And then half of the saffron milk. And we repeat. And the last thing is to get around about an ounce of butter and just scatter that on the top.